Hey everybody, Asian Fahzaly Gamer here. I just want to take a second, put out a small disclaimer to let you all know that I am not a mental health professional. I just want to do my best to be able to help others with my own experience, and at the very least, hope to be able to point people in the right direction if they do need help. And of course, I also want to remind people that we do go into very heavy and potentially triggering subjects. So that is something to be considered. But I do appreciate your support for you being here. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy this episode of Fahzaly Advice. Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fahzaly Advice. Today is a very special episode of Fahzaly Advice, as this is our DND Am I the Asshole episode, as both of our submissions are pretty much along the same lines, and they are all based in D&D. And it is kind of awesome because, well, today we have our DNDoofs livecast podcast, which we do every other Friday, and from now on it's going to be on YouTube rather than live on Twitch. And of course, we do post the D&D podcast on YouTube completely edited and on Spotify for everyone to enjoy. Currently, the end of this month, episode 2 will be posted. Episode 3 will be posted. Currently, episode 2 is up, as well as episode 1, available for everybody on Spotify and YouTube. And of course, for those of you who are wondering how you can support me as a content creator, as this is what I do full time, it's as simple and as easy as like, share, comment, and subscribe for more. Now, I do want to take a second to also say thank you to you, our viewers, and all of our supporters. Thank you so much for supporting me as a content creator. It truly does mean the world. And to our submitters, for without you, there would be no podcast. With that, let's get on into our first submission, shall we? This one is brought to us by Forever Player, and they write, Dear Fahza, so I saw your last episode of Fahzaly Advice included something I haven't really seen on the podcast, so I thought I'd give it a shot. So I have been part of a D&D group for the better part of 3 years now, and we have had a ton of fun. Sadly though, one of our most important members, our DM, had to move because their work reassigned them overseas for a venture we can't really talk about. So our group has been without a steady DM for about a month now. We thankfully were able to end our main campaign and retire our characters before our DM left, and it was a fun way to say goodbye. Recently, one of the other players, who was the most recent one to join us, asked for a chance to DM, and we were all happy to oblige to see what he could do as a DM. Well, that was a huge mistake, as he began this awkwardly with something that he said came from another tabletop game we knew little about, which was Warhammer. The BBEG he created as himself was a warlock of Slaanesh. Oh no. Sorry. And he wanted to seduce our characters. Oh no. I was the first to say something because this really made me uncomfortable. I guess what I said gave everyone else the courage to say something because we all began to openly agree this campaign setting was uncomfortable and we didn't want to do this. He started spouting off about how this is supposed to be a fantasy and nothing real happens, and we're being ridiculous about it. He kept insisting that it's just a game and we were being toxic and woke about this. This was when I walked out and everyone else followed me. This was kind of awesome because it just reaffirmed that we were friends, not just a D&D group. The other player started texting me saying that I made everyone leave, that I caused a scene being a toxic woke asshole. So I gotta ask here, Fahza, was I out of line? Sincerely, Forever Player. Now then, my friend, first off, let me just start this by saying, you are awesome. Honestly, I personally am proud of you because you stood up for what you believed in and you didn't even blink an eye. You said what you meant, and you weren't afraid to say it. Which, in all honesty, there are too many people out there that are just willing to stand by because they don't want to make anybody uncomfortable. But the thing is, if you're uncomfortable, then that is a valid enough reason to speak up. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having boundaries. It's not your fault that other people are so weak in their constitution that you actually reinforcing your boundaries makes them freak out for some reason. That's not your fault. That's not anybody's fault of anybody out there that stands to be in a position where someone is willing to push their boundaries and disregard how they feel, and then turn themselves into the victim whenever it's mentioned or spoken about. That is extremely manipulative and extremely narcissistic. And honestly, it's awesome to hear that your friend stood up with you. No one should have to sit through a situation like that. And I am sorry. Actually, no. I'm not sorry. I am not sorry that there are people out there that want to say, oh, this is woke, this is that, as an excuse to put other people down because they don't want to do something, because they want inclusion, because they don't think certain things are appropriate. Especially in a setting like a game. You know, it is like he said, or the person said, yeah, it's a game. It's supposed to be a fantasy. It's not supposed to be traumatic, nor is it supposed to be disgusting. Especially if it's not the setting that y'all agreed upon. Consent is key. Especially when it comes to something like D&D. D&D is supposed to be an experience where friends can come together and enjoy an experience. Go on an adventure in a setting that is based in our imagination. Not to reenact somebody's sick-ass fantasy. That is never the case. And that should never be the case. There shouldn't be players out there that want this. It doesn't make any sense that they do. It's creepy, and it's not just creepy in a fantasy setting, it's creepy outside of a fantasy setting too. And I'm not sorry if this offends anybody. You shouldn't want to impose your fantasy onto others if it pushes their boundaries or if it breaks their boundaries. Immediately, if someone says no, then it should shut down the conversation there. No is a complete sentence. And there are too many people that are willing to disregard that. And it is disgusting and sad. Now, I'm saying this as someone who is actually a person that enjoys the Warhammer 40k fantasy world as well as the Warhammer 40k tabletop game and the offshoot games as well, because I'm personally currently mainlining playing Space Marines 2 on my live Twitch. But that aside, the Warhammer 40k universe is a terrible universe. It is known as the Grim Dark, and there is nothing good in the Grim Dark. And that is that setting, and that is what it is meant to be. Now, the people who play that game understand that, and there is a mutual consent about the setting as it is, but also an understanding of mutual respect for the most part. Obviously, that's not always the case, but that's generally what I have witnessed. Because there is an understanding that the Warhammer 40k universe is bad. Not bad as in it's badly written. It's just a bad place to be. But I'm going to be honest with you. Anybody who says they want to bring in the Warlock of Slaanesh idea into D&D immediately throws up red flags. And I'm not one who does that. I don't do the whole red flag thing. But if you look up who Slaanesh is, you kind of realize why, because you didn't know anything about Warhammer. he kind of used that ignorance, and I don't mean that in an insulting way, but he used that ignorance to manipulate y'all into doing this, or at the very least attempting to do this. Which, once again, good for you for standing up and saying no. Because no, just no. It is unbelievably inappropriate for a DM or a player to incite some form of intimate fantasy of their own into a D&D campaign or any game whatsoever, really. Unless, of course, there is a mutual consent. Key words there. Mutual consent of everyone involved. This sort of setting should never come into play. It just shouldn't. And I'm not saying that, oh no, fantasies are bad, blah, 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 blah. I'm not here to kink shame anybody. No. What I am here to say is there is never anything wrong with enforcing your boundaries. There's never anything wrong with saying no. But there is everything wrong in trying to implicate others and manipulate them without giving them the full picture of exactly what the hell is going on. Because I am certain if he explained to you what a Warlock of Slaanesh entailed, y'all would never have agreed to let him be the DM. And you probably could have avoided a lot of this. But that seems like, from what I can tell in this submission, although there are things that I don't know, remember, when it comes down to situations, context is nuance. But when it comes down to this particular situation, there was a manipulation here, and it is quite obvious. And it's not like obvious in a way that means that y'all were stupid falling for it. No. It just means that he was just a little bit more devious than he really should have been over something that is as simple as a D&D game. D&D should be innocent. Well, as innocent as it can be, depending on who's involved and what is agreed upon. It should be fun. It should be an adventure of imagination, but it should, like I said, it should never be a standpoint of trauma or a reenactment of something so intimate, unless, of course, agreed upon. So, you were not out of line. Not in any way. You are not the asshole here, my friend. Truly. No, that DM is, because that is just wrong. And I'm going to put this out there for anybody who wants to get into D&D. There are plenty of groups out there. There are plenty of people out there, and there are plenty of ways you can reach out, even online, to be able to find a group to play with. But never stand there to think that you have to be part of a campaign that has something that you're uncomfortable with. If the DM ever brings up a concept that you are not comfortable with, speak up. Say something. And the way that DM reacts will tell you more about their character than anything. And that'll be a determining factor of whether or not you should stay. Because if the only thing they're willing to do is give you excuses and attempt to make you be okay with something you're not okay with, that should immediately tell you it's time to walk away. Because if they cared, if it mattered, anyone who's a good DM or a good player of D&D, they would simply wash their hands of the concept and be okay with walking away with it. Because the last thing any person should want to do in a setting that's supposed to be fun is make somebody feel uncomfortable. It is unnecessary. And for those of you out there that want to come into the comments and say stuff like, oh, it's just a game, it's just this or that, you're the problem. I'm sorry, but no, I'm not sorry. You're the problem. You have no reason to be part of D&D if all you want to do is implicate others in your sick fantasies. That is not what D&D is about. D&D is about living in a story. It is about using your imagination to adventure and unfold in a world where you can experience wonder, danger, and so much more. But there's a line. As much as anything, there's always a line. Because there's a time and place for things. And there is no excuse to forget that. Too many people look for a reason to forget time and place. Time and place. A fantasy game is not the time or the place or any sort of intimate, odd fantasy. Once again, caveat, unless, of course, mutually agreed upon. But the moment it becomes uncomfortable, the moment anybody speaks up and says, I don't know if I want to do this, is the moment that as a DM or as a player, there's a responsibility to recognize that, not disregard it. Now, I appreciate you, Forever Player, for this submission. And for those of you who are watching today's episode of Fahzaly Advice, thank you so very, very much. But before we continue on to the second submission, let's have a small commercial break, shall we?
Well, hey there, everybody. Did you know that Asian Fasha Gamer has a Patreon?
That's right, everybody, and we're here to tell you about it together.
Subscribers have a chance to see content early, as well as request content on higher tiers.
That's right. You can ask Asian Fasha Gamer to read you a story, talk to you about lore or gameplay, or many other things.
But wait, there's more.
Subs that have been stayed around for 3 months or longer get special gifts. And if we reach our stretch goal of 10 subs or more, we will continue to add more to the Patreon, making it better for all of you.
So please consider, at the very least, checking out Asian Fasha Gamer's Patreon. Maybe subscribing and supporting him. And of course, we thank you for your time.
Hey, everybody. Mr. Announcer and Random Scholar here to tell you about something amazing.
That's right. We have a merch store known as the AFG Brand Store, where you can purchase many different things.
Do you want a tin cup? Do you want a water bottle? Do you need a shirt? Do you need other things? Things that make you so that you support Asian Fasha Gamer? Well, check out the AFG Brand Store.
But wait, there's more.
That's right. We are going to be continuing to add to the merch store. On the monthly, we'll be adding in new designs, as well as, of course, introducing discounts for all of you.
So check out the AFGBrandstore.com.
Alrighty then. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed our first submission and our first segment, and we are going into our second submission. And for those of you who are wondering how you can submit to the Fahzaly Advice podcast to have it read and to receive some advice, well, stay until the very end of this episode to see more information on that. And remember, my friends, if you do want to support me as a full-time content creator, it's as simple, as easy, and as free as like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. Alrighty then, my friends. Let's get on into our next submission, shall we? This one is brought to me by a personal friend who wishes to remain anonymous. So, they are going under the moniker Fellow DM. And they write, Dear Fasha, I host and DM a weekly D&D group. I had a player have an extremely rude rant about the consequences of their behavior. This is not their first outburst. Just the worst. When I privately talked to each of the other players, I discovered one was about to leave the group because the problem player's multiple outbursts have been negatively affecting their mental health. No one else objected, so I sent them a message explaining why they were being removed and then booted them from my server. I won't lose a good player because of a bad one. Was I too quick to boot this person, or was protecting the good player worth the quick removal? Sincerely, a fellow DM. Alrighty then. So, fellow DM, here's what I have to say about this situation. Now, there are some people who will look at this at its surface and just say, oh yeah, no, you were too quick. You didn't give them a chance to explain themselves, this and that. But, excuse me. 1 second. There we go. Refocusing. But, when you actually look at your submission, you've already stated it. This is not their first outburst. And here's the thing. Excuse me. I just had to move my chair. But here's something that, when it comes to D&D, or tabletop games in general that have someone that is a DM, or a game master, dungeon master, someone who's in charge of the interworkings of the game and the consequences of what may happen afterwards, mostly involving games like D&D. There are consequences to actions, because just because it's fantasy doesn't mean that you should, at least doesn't mean that a DM will simply allow everything to happen willy-nilly. A good DM doesn't simply give you everything that you want right away. It's about making your players, allowing for your players at the very least, the opportunity to roleplay, to work into it, to explore the world and themselves as a character so that they can get what they want through doing so. That's what a good DM does. But there's no instance where you can play this game without consequences. In fact, when you really think about it, there are no games out there really without some form of consequence, depending on what you do. I mean, actually, there are games out there without any actual consequence other than the game ends. But ultimately, every action has a opposite and equal reaction. And gaming is no different. When you do something in a game that you're not supposed to do, or something that causes you to gain damage, you get hurt, and eventually you will lose the game. That can happen. And not have consequences is essentially just going through the motions and telling a story with no actual true meaningful interaction. And as odd as this might sound to the people who have not played D&D, when you start playing D&D, when you start getting into tabletop games that involve building a story and using your imagination, you have to realize that you can't just want to, say, go across an acid swamp by making shoes out of mushrooms and thinking, oh, this will get me over. That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, it's a fantasy, but fantasy, for it to even be fun or for it to have any story to be told with substance, needs to have grounding. It's not like you're in a dream world and every single thing that you want to have happen just magically happens. There are rules. In fact, D&D has rule sets. That's the reason why there are so many books. That's the reason why there's a way to play the game. Sure, you are able to bend it this way or that way, but there are consequences that need to be had. And it's not like these are consequences to punish your players. Any DM that uses consequences to punish players is essentially kind of being toxic and controlling. Consequences should essentially lead to different routes for your players, different things happening. And just because they get a good roll doesn't mean they'll always get what they want. That's at the discretion of the DM and the discretion of the story and the events that are currently occurring. One moment while I rehydrate. That's right, I drink Dr. Pepper. Anyways, let's continue. So, and it becomes more so complicated when you add into the fact that this is more than likely, from what I can tell from the verbiage that you're using here, an online D&D group. And there is a lot more need for discretion in that kind of setting. Because when it's person to person, there is a level of accountability that is inherently there because there are bodies there to witness everything to occur. But when it's on an online setting, there is a level of anonymity that alleviates accountability in a way that is actually quite toxic. And it is something that always needs to be accounted for in an online setting. And when you have the majority state that one person's actions and everybody agreeing upon that one person's actions is negatively affecting the group, and the fact of the matter is this is not the first time they've had an outburst, this is just the worst, meaning more than likely, knowing you, fellow DM, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt here, and also just knowing you as a person, you more than likely talk to them about their behavior before in the past. And there has been no change, as there have been multiple outbursts. And the thing is, giving a person a chance only means so much after so long. After a while, it's just enabling. Just like in life, just like in games, everything needs to have consequences. Otherwise, there's no weight to anything. So when it comes down to something like this, you've given that particular player enough chances, and those chances led to you learning that, well, this player's actions haven't changed and are continuing to affect the group. And as a responsible DM, you made the right decision. That is my wholehearted opinion when it comes down to this. Because I agree with you. I personally will not lose a good player to keep the group together, because then the group falls apart already. So then what's the point? Sometimes you need to separate the wheat from the chaff. It happens. And when they're not willing to understand, when there have been multiple conversations, and those conversations are not listened to, and there is no change of behavior, sorry means nothing when it doesn't lead to anything. I know people might say that can be kind of harsh, but here's something to consider. Your peace of mind, your enjoyment is worth protecting. And as cruel and as cold-hearted as this might sound, especially when it comes to the internet, and I'm saying this as a content creator who has a community that I care about, but this is also something that I have an understanding of when it comes to being on the internet in itself as a whole. When it comes down to the fact that the majority of internet relationships, if not all of them, are parasocial relationships. And that's easy come, easy go. I know that sounds cruel. I know. But as a content creator, as someone who's been on the internet for a long time, who's done this kind of stuff and interacted with people, it's the truth. There will be people who will be there, and there will be people who will go. It'll happen. And it's on you to assimilate and consider the weight of each interaction that you have. You're not a monster if you compartmentalize and think that the parasocial relationships you have don't have as much weight as the relationships that you consider beyond just that. Loyalty is earned, not through time, not through just simple presence, but by action. And you need not be loyal to those who simply offer nothing more than just their presence, but only do so to take away. You have too much value in your time, your mind, your heart, and your actions to deal with disingenuous nature in this world. So, it's something that we have to understand. It's a reality of society. It's not that you're cycling through people. It's that you're filtering your community. You're filtering your friend circle to eventually find people who want to be there for you. Not for what you can offer. Not for how often you acquiesce. But for you as a whole. Be your disagreements or agreements. And I know this goes into a much deeper conversation than just D&D, just being a DM and just removing somebody. But it's all things that need to be considered overall when it comes down to our social interactions, because D&D is a social interaction. And it might hurt at times to lose people, to have to say goodbye, to have to be the heavy hand that removes when necessary to protect others. But sometimes we gotta do what's necessary, don't we? And that doesn't make you evil. It doesn't make you a bad person. That doesn't make you the asshole. And in this situation, my friend, fellow DM, you were definitely not too quick to boot this person. Especially because, once again, I point out, not their first outburst. You did what you needed to do to protect the group and continue on. And there ain't nothing wrong with that. Alrighty then, my friends. With that, I do hope you enjoyed this episode of Fahzaly Advice. I appreciate all of you for your support and for everything. And of course, I appreciate my Patreon subs. With your support, I am able to continue on doing this. And if you want to know how to support me as a content creator on Patreon, well, check out the links below. Alrighty then, my friends. It's time for this love train to get rolling on through. Choo choo. I love every single freaking one of you. Well, everybody, that's the end of Fahzaly Advice. I hope you did enjoy this episode and you found some value in what I said. And of course, if you are interested in participating, if you need some advice or some perspective, feel free to email the address at the end of this part. And remember, all submissions are 100% anonymous. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
Need some perspective? Need some advice? Want your submission read on podcast? Well, email Fahza at fahzalyadvice@gmail.com. And remember, all submissions are 100% anonymous unless requested upon.